Okay, hopefully that was at least a quick little snippet of time that you can go into your notes and review what we talked about yesterday. All right, there was a lot of information that was dumped on you, especially when it comes to the various different terms of the lubrication system and how that stuff is configured and arranged and all that stuff, okay? The goal with that, again, is just to kind of refresh your memory what we talked about, to keep it at the forefront so you don't forget about it, okay? So that way when we go into today, we can add to that. And hopefully we can start categorizing that stuff and putting more on top of it without necessarily overwhelming you, all right? So yesterday we left off with multi-viscosity oils. Okay, we talked about viscosity, right? Viscosity being essentially defined as the ability of a liquid or a fluid to flow, resistance to flow. All right, we showed you an example of like water, right? Every fluid is going to be compared to water. And then we also took a look at like maple syrup, okay, and the differences between those two fluids. Back in the day, with motor oil, you would buy a specific viscosity rating. Okay, so in the springtime, you would change your oil out, and you would put a thicker oil in, because during the summertime it was hot out. Okay, so it had a lot of temperature. You didn't want too thin of oil, because if you had too thin of oil, okay, it wouldn't kind of lubricate as well. It would run more. It wouldn't stick. So you'd want a thicker oil to kind of stay in place. Then in the fall, when you knew winter was coming, you would actually change out your motor oil viscosity to a thinner oil. So that way in January, when it's super cold, you'd want your oil to be able to more freely or easily flow in your engine to be able to get to the various parts, to be able to lubricate stuff. All right? Now, due to engineering and the advancements of technology, we now can actually engineer our motor oil to have a multi-viscosity. So it's not just a single viscosity rating, we can actually have two, which means I only need one oil now that acts thin in the wintertime, and it also is thick in the summertime. Super convenient, okay? So any oil that you purchase now at any place is going to have this capability, all right? It's going to be thin in the cold and thick when it's hot out, okay? And again, reasons for that. So you've probably seen, hey, if I go up and buy an oil, right, I have 5W30, 0W40, okay? That viscosity rating, let's just go to 5W30 here, right? I have a 5 viscosity rating when it's cold out, and I have a 30 viscosity rating when it's warm out. So it kind of acts as both, all right? So again, if we think about this in maple syrup, right? If I take some maple syrup and I stick it outside in January and I go to try to pour that on my pancakes, because it's colder, it's thicker. It flows slower.
How?
All right. How? Because it's less energized, right? If I were to take that same maple syrup out from outside, right, in January, and stick it in a microwave for 20 seconds, now I'm adding energy into that fluid. Now all of a sudden I pull that out, it's hot. Now when I pour it out, it's going to be more water-like. It's going to flow much easier. I don't know if you've ever done that with maple syrup, okay? But it kind of shows the dynamic of how we can add heat or take away heat, and it changes how that fluid interacts with its ability to flow. All right, so which of the following separates engine parts to prevent metal-on-metal contact? Getting into our clickers here. Let's see our first hour. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right, so let's see here. 59% of us got that one correct. Let me call on someone who got it correct. Steven, what do you got?
Oil
Oil film, yes. Okay. The whole purpose behind why we have oil in our engine is to have an oil film that essentially is a barrier between two pieces of metal. Okay, it's a lubricant. It's there to make sure that it doesn't rub and create friction and wear and tear. Okay, bearings. Okay, in this case, if we're talking our engine, right, we got a friction bearing or even an anti-friction bearing. They don't. The friction bearings don't move. It relies on the oil film as a lubricant to be able to allow that to turn. So that's why that would be off. Galleries. What is a gallery?
Where it goes to.
Yeah. It's like the arteries, right? It's what the oil travels through. That doesn't necessarily, or it doesn't separate the engine parts. And then additives. Typically, oil is going to have a bunch of additives and detergents and all that stuff. But that's already in our oil, and that boosts its ability to be a better lubricant. So A is the best answer in this particular question. All right, the API, American Petroleum Institute. Okay, again, another organization. This is the organization that's going to go in here and it's going to actually set oil service ratings. Okay, it's going to set oil service ratings. Are going to be performance standards of how well that oil will protect you under operating conditions. Okay, any bottle of oil that you have is going to have this on there. Okay, it's called a donut because it looks like a donut, right? You can pick it up, sugar, now make it hungry, okay? So, again, this is kind of like the viscosity rating, but again, the viscosity rating is based on SAE standards. API sets this, and it says, aha, okay? This particular oil is rated for an SN service rating. We'll talk about what that means in a little bit. In the center here, it's going to have the SAE rating. So this viscosity rating is a 5W20. And then it's going to have some additional information down here. So this one is actually an SN+, and it's resource conserving. So very quickly, again, if I have a Pennzoil, a Valvoline, a Mobil 1, doesn't matter the brand, every oil that's produced is going to have these markings on it. So that way you as a consumer will know certain properties about that oil, so that way you can make an educated decision about what you put in your engine to protect it. And again, if you don't know what to put in your engine, this is where you need to consult your manufacturer. Hey, I got a Ford F-150, cool. Ford designed the engine. They engineered what kind of lubrication it needs in what type of conditions, right? And then they're going to pass that information on to you based off of this stuff that American Petroleum Institute and Society of Automotive Engineers has come up with. Okay, so then, oh, okay, my vehicle needs a 5W20 and it needs to be an SN+. Cool, I can pull a bottle off the shelf and I can look for this information on there. Hey, this works for my vehicle. Boom. Okay. So it's all part of that. Now, I'm not going to read all that. One thing to keep in mind is currently in 2024, I believe, actually, I don't know, I haven't updated this. At least in 2023, the highest rating of our API is SP. Okay? So if I go out there and I purchase a brand new 2024 vehicle, it might require an SP rated motor oil. All right, well, Mr. Getsky, I own a vehicle that's from 2002. All right, I only require maybe like an SL. Right, they don't sell that anymore. How do I change motor oil now? Well, the good news is SP is backwards compatible because it's superior to every other letter that's before that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? So They usually only sell the highest quality stuff on the shelf due to the fact that it's backwards compatible. Okay. On a side note, if it starts with an S in front of it, right, that means you have a spark ignition, aka gasoline 4-stroke engine. If it was a C and a P, that C would stand for compression or commercial, aka a diesel. Very important that you understand if you've got a diesel engine, you're not putting gasoline or motor oil in it. It's different. Okay, for various different reasons. All right, so we're looking again for SP. Now again, this service rating right here shows an SN because it's a little bit older. But you can see here, right, the top part here, this top donut half, is linked up with performance level. The center circle is going to be its viscosity grade, and then this bottom donut here is going to be linked up with the resource conserving and energy conserving section. So that's kind of how that donut's broken down. Now, I'm not going to ask you anything about this on the test, right? But it's still good information to know because, again, I probably should have gotten a bottle of oil here. You can see that, very quickly understand what's going on, okay? Oh, here, let me go back real quick. I didn't talk about this, but I want to let you know because this is information that nobody understands, and it's mind-boggling to me. Let me go even back further. Even further. Come on. There we go. Okay. So in this case, 5W30, 0W40. I'll use 0W40 as an example. Right? We know that the viscosity rating is 0 when it's cold out, and we know that it's 40 when it's hot out. What does that W stand for? No one knows this.
Weather.
Weather.
Weight.
Water. Weight. That's probably, weight is probably the most common answer on that. It's none of that. The hint is the viscosity rating. This viscosity rating is how the oil acts when it's cold out. When is it cold?
Winter.
That W stands for winter. Isn't that weird? So when you see 0W40, it just simply stands for when it's winter out, this oil acts as a 0 viscosity. Okay? 40 is when it gets warm out.
So why isn't it 0W40S?
Well, if I warm up my engine, right, even in winter time, right, it gets hot. So it's going to start out with this, right, but then it's probably going to end up getting thicker as the engine warms up. So it's not always summertime. Kind of weird, huh? W is winter. All right. That was free information, by the way. Now you can go home, you can be like asking siblings or mom and dad, hey, what does the W stand for in 5W30? They won't know, but you do. It's kind of fun. All right, full flow oiling systems using automobile engines force all of the oil through the filter before it is allowed to lubricate the bearings. This is very important to know, okay? So the order is this. We go from our oil pan. Oops, oil pan, right? That then gets picked up through the pickup tube. I'm just abbreviating here. Once it gets picked up through the pickup tube, it then goes through the oil pump. Unfiltered. It goes through the oil pump unfiltered. Then it goes through the filter. And then it travels through the galleries to our bearings and all our friction surfaces. All right, that's kind of the order of operation. Now, I'll just put this in here a little bit. There is there's a screen on the pickup tube, so any really large, nasty things aren't going to get picked up, okay? But the really, really fine particles that the oil is picked up due to the combustion process is going through the pump unfiltered. All right, you need to understand that. Which means, right, if my oil is really dirty because I haven't changed it in a long time, that could affect the performance of my pump.
Or your oil filter.
Okay. Well, it definitely, the filter will filter it out for sure, which makes that more clogged up over a period of time. But I'm kind of inadvertently causing damage to my pump, right? Over a long period of time. That could cause that to fail. What happens if your heart fails?
You die.
You die. If this pump fails, guess what happens to your engine?
You die.
It dies.
You die.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, another reason why we want to make sure that we're monitoring the age of our oil that's in our engine. And we are changing it frequently.
How often is frequently?
Depends. That's the worst answer I could possibly give you, but it's the correct answer. Okay? Again, back in the day when we're talking about conventional oil, we're talking about like every 3,000 miles. Every 3,000 miles. So, typically speaking, you're probably driving about 15,000 miles a year. Okay, 15,000 miles a year divided by 3,000 is what?
5 times a year.
So about 5 times a year you're changing your motor oil. Raise your hand if you change your motor oil 5 times a year. Okay. Interesting, right? But this is kind of what we need to think about. Now, I will tell you this right off the bat, that some motor oils are superior to other motor oils. And there are some manufacturers that say, hey, you only need to change your oil once every 15,000 miles. You only need to change it once a year. That's dangerous, okay? Just throw that out there. And again, if you talk to 10 different auto technicians, they're gonna give you 11 different answers on how often you should change your motor oil. There's never been an engine that blows up because you change your oil too much. Just remember that.
That we know.
Okay? If you change your engine oil too much, your engine's not going to blow up. It's going to perform at its peak. Okay? Engines only blow up if you don't maintain them. This is the number one to maintain it. All right, again, just to kind of real quick review on this one, here's a different picture, right? Here's my oil pan down here. Here's my oil level. Here's my pickup tube. So all that oil is getting sucked up through the straw. It's going in here, right? And it's here's my oil pump, okay, unfiltered. Then it gets pushed into my oil filter where it gets filtered out. And then it goes through, here's all my bearings on my crankshaft, which is right there. Okay, it comes up here, gets squirted on the cylinder walls in my engine block. It comes all the way up here. Here's my valves, right? It gets squirted up here and gets all over the place. Then again, all of it flows back down or drips back down and ends up back in my oil pan. Okay? All right, the sump. That is the term that we use. The sump is a specific spot in our oil pan. Okay? The sump is the lowest area of my oil pan. Okay, sometimes real quick, here's an oil pan. Do you see how it kind of comes down here? And this section right here is lower than this section over here. This section here is known as the sump. That's the sump.
What goes on in there?
Well,
Mostly old oil.
the idea is the fact that we got gravity, right? Gravity always pulls liquid down to the lowest spot. So, because I will have my oil pickup tube, I want to make sure my oil pickup tube is at the lowest possible spot. Because even if I'm running low on oil, there's probably still enough in there to where I can pick it up and circulate it. Okay? If I have my oil pickup tube in a higher spot, I could be running low on oil, and all of a sudden it's starting to starve itself, which is not good. Okay? So I'm kind of manipulating the shape of that sump in order to make sure that even if I'm running low on oil, I've got something to help lubricate. All right. So again, here's an actual oil pan. This is off of the Dodge Intrepid, our shop car. Okay. It's probably a little harder to see, but like right in here, this is the lowest section of this oil pan. The pickup tube is going to come in here and it's going to sit right off the bottom.
Wow.
Okay. And it's going to pick that up and pump it. Okay. Then I got
Why
my
is that off?
oil filter right here. That's actually part of my pan. All right. The oil is able to go in here, get filtered, and then comes out, which is kind of fun. It's also very dirty.
How's that in?
Why is it in here? Because I had to fix the drain plug. It was stripped out, so we had to put new threads in it. We did that in my Auto 2 class.
But that was fun.
It was. Normally speaking, I wouldn't have to drop the oil pan to be able to fix those threads, but the cross member was right in the way of my drill, so we had to literally drop the whole pan just to fix it. It's annoying. Stupid Dodge. Okay, we also have to understand a couple things here. Another term that's on this particular slide is the baffle. Okay? A baffle is another key vocabulary term. It is another section of our lubrication system. This is a baffle. Okay? So you got your oil pan. I don't know if I'm going to be able to draw this. Okay? Here's my oil pan. Here's my crankshaft with the counterweights. This is going to be spinning, high rate of speed. I got an oil level right there. I do not want this crankshaft to actually dip into that oil because it's going to act like a blender. Do you ever take like you're making cookies or something in your kitchen, right? You got your ingredients, all of a sudden you get your blender out, you put it in there, and all of a sudden it starts mixing everything up, right? That's the whole idea behind a blender. But then it gets air in there and it froths that up, right? Because you're making cookies. In this case, it's the same kind of concept, but if this counterweights get in the oil, it's going to act like a blender. It's going to start stirring it, and it's going to get air mixed in with the oil. That's bad. That's like really bad. Okay? When you have oil and you add air, right, it becomes foamy, or has a foamy froth to it, which actually lowers the oil's ability to lubricate. Okay? Equals not good. So we have to understand, low oil level is bad because it potentially allows the engine to starve of a lubricant. We're not feeding it. Overfilling oil is equally as bad because now all of a sudden it's going to start getting frothy. We get air in the system, which then again lowers the oil's ability to lubricate. Okay, so we want a Goldilocks range. We want just the right amount of oil, so that way it doesn't interact with the crankshaft, and it's not low enough to where we starve the engine. Now, to assist the crankshaft, counterweights, and all that stuff not interacting with the oil, we have a baffle. It's basically a shield that goes underneath the crankshaft, right? And it allows the oil to kind of stay at the bottom of the engine without it interacting and mixing. Okay? That's the idea behind the baffle. I don't have a physical example to show you, but if we walk outside into the underneath the Intrepid and you look where the oil pan was, you can see the baffle. All right, oil pickup tube that extends towards the from the pump down into the oil pan. It does have a screen, probably a little hard to see on here. And that's, again, just to help kind of filter out large particles. Okay, hey, you get a big chunk of something that fell down into the oil pan, or you have metal shavings. We don't want to circulate that metal shavings. That screen is just going to help kind of stop that from getting in, okay? So here you can see, here's my oil pickup tube. Okay, that's going to be on in the sump on our lubrication system. Remember, oil pumps receive unfiltered oil. Okay? Oil pumps receive unfiltered oil. All right, moving on here. What we got? Oil pumps can be driven by a shaft, a belt, by gears, or can be crankshaft driven. There's a lot of different ways to power this. Okay. Depending on how the engine is designed, right? We can hook up to the crankshaft. We can hook up to our timing belt. Maybe there's some gearing in there. Maybe even into our camshaft. But it's probably going to be more likely to be crankshaft driven. Okay? And the reason for, right? If I'm starting to hit the accelerator on my vehicle and I have more RPM, more power, I need more lubrication. So the faster that crankshaft spins, right, the faster the oil pump spins, which means the faster it picks up lubrication and the more force it gets that oil out to the various different spots. Okay? The slower that engine RPM goes, right, we don't need that much oil, so it slows down and it provides just the right amount of lubricant for what the engine needs at any given point in time. Okay? So that's why it's typically crankshaft driven. All right, so there's two major designs to our oil pumps. We're going to either have a rotary, which is right there. Oh no, excuse me, that's a gear type. That's a gear. This is a rotary. Okay, I'm not going to get into too technicalities here, but this rotates. And you can see here that I've got kind of like some gaps in between the actual like rotary piece, and it gets larger and larger and larger. But as this rotates, what happens is oil is picked up, it fills in this gap in between there, and as this rotates, it basically gets smaller and smaller, and squeezes it, and then it forces it out. So that's how we're able to pump it on a rotary or rotate type oil pump. The gear system is very similar as well. Okay, oil gets filled into this gap inside the gears, and as this is rotating, one's going that way, one's going this way, it literally squeezes and forces the oil out through the center. Okay, nothing overly complicated, but you can imagine for a second, again, this is going to receive unfiltered oil. Okay, so all those particulates and stuff could get in here and it could start to wear away at these teeth of these gears or in a rotary as well. Okay, so we got to monitor that as needed. And again, if you're changing your oil at regular intervals, you're going to prolong the life of that oil pump. Okay, just like how you would with your heart, right? The more time you exercise it, the better. All right, while discussing oil pump drive methods, Tech A says the oil pump can be driven by a gear on the camshaft. Tech B says the oil pump can be driven by a cogged belt. Who is right? Some of this information you might have to infer. Make sure it's straight up and down. If it's got crooked, I'm not going to get an answer. There we go. All right, we got everybody. Yes, we did. All right. Ooh, this one's a little tricky. A little tricky. Only 25% of you guys got that one correct. Easton, what'd you get?
C.
C, both of them. Okay, that is the correct answer. So let's, because we had quite a few people not struggling on this one a little bit, real quick. Tech A says the oil pump can be driven by a gear. Does it matter where the gear is at? Okay, well, in this case, the camshaft. The camshaft spins, but it's in time with the crankshaft. The key word here is the gear. Okay, Tech B says oil pump can be driven by a belt. In this case, we just described the belt as a cogged belt. All right, so those are the kind of keywords that describe how we're driving our oil pump. So let's go back a slide. Actually, 2 slides. Oil pumps can be driven by what? belt, gears. Okay, it could also be driven by a shaft or even crankshaft driven. All right, but belt and gears. So when we come back to this question again, let me read it out loud to you. While discussing oil pump drive methods, how are we powering that oil pump? Tech A says the oil pump can be driven by a gear. True. Tech B says the oil pump can be driven by a belt. Also true. So that's why answer C is the correct answer, because both of them are correct. What? No? All right, let's talk about oil filters for a little bit. Oh my goodness.
We're done.
Yeah, we got 3 minutes.
Oh.
Let me get through this one real quick. Oil filters contain a bypass valve. Okay? You ever have like a grandpa or grandma or maybe an older person that you know have a bypass surgery for their heart? Maybe you've heard of it before. Okay? Typically what happens is in my heart, I'm old, my arteries start to get clogged up. Okay, so what they're going to actually do is open up my chest. And they're going to actually put in essentially a different channel for my blood to flow in that's not clogged. It bypasses the clog. Okay, same concept here with my filter. If my filter becomes too clogged, it's not going to be able to lubricate my system. So I've got a valve in there that opens up and it bypasses that clog to allow unfiltered oil to get into my engine. And the reason for that is if I want, hey folks, sit. 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 There we go. Okay? Is unfiltered oil bad for my engine? Yes. Is no oil in my engine bad? Yes. Which one's worse?
No oil.
No oil. If I have a clogged filter, it's not getting oil into my engine. So I would much rather have unfiltered oil go through my engine and have some lubrication than none at all.
Hopefully you realize
Okay.
you changed your oil.
Yeah, that would be hopeful, yes. Okay, so just something to consider. We'll probably touch base with this again tomorrow. Just kind of review that. Okay. All right. Is there any quick questions for me? Okay.
That's very stupid, but I
Charger.
Have a good day, everyone.
Apparently she's gonna be dropping.